It was 3 minutes past 3 on a Tuesday afternoon that would sear itself into my memory forever. I'd raced through the sliding glass doors of Mercy General Hospital, my heart hammering against my ribs like a fist demanding entry. The fluorescent lights of the ICU hummed with a sound that felt like it was drilling directly into my skull. It was a Tuesday afternoon, gray and weeping with rain against the thick hospital glass, when I found myself standing at the precipice of the worst moment of my life. I was rushing to St. Jude's Medical Center to sign what I had been told were compassionate release forms for my younger sister. I believed, with every broken piece of my heart, that I was making the mercy call, the decision to let her go. But when I arrived at room 404 and reached for the ballpoint pen resting on the bedside table, a cold hand clamped around my wrist. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate. I looked up to see a young nurse, her face pale, her eyes wide with a genuine, visceral terror. She leaned in so close I could smell the stale coffee on her breath, and she whispered, "Don't sign anything. Please, just trust me. Give me 10 minutes, and you'll understand why." I froze. My hand hovered over the paper. I looked from her frightened face to my brother-in-law, Gavin, who was standing on the other side of the bed. His suit was immaculate, his expression mournful, but his smile, it was just a fraction too eager. A fraction too ready. I had no idea that 10 minutes later, I wouldn't be signing release papers. I would be watching security footage that would shatter my reality. I had no idea that the woman I had spent 6 decades loving and protecting wasn't dying from a natural aneurysm, but was actively being turned into a murder victim by the two people standing closest to her bedside. Before I take you into the depths of this nightmare, let me ask you something. Have you ever had that feeling in the pit of your stomach, that primal instinct screaming that something is terribly, horribly wrong, even when everyone around you is telling you that you're crazy? If you have, drop a comment below and tell me your story, because that instinct isn't paranoia. It's survival. And if this story chills you to the bone, please hit that like button and subscribe. Your support helps bring the truth to light. This nightmare began 3 days earlier with a phone call that tore through the silence of my retirement. It was Gavin. His voice was trembling, a perfect performance of a devastated husband. He told me that my little sister, Clara, had collapsed in their kitchen. She was on life support. A massive brain bleed, he said. The doctors were saying it was catastrophic. Clara was only 58. The last time I saw her, 2 weeks prior, she was radiant. She had been talking about her garden, about the trip to the French Riviera she had been saving for, about finally learning to paint. She was vibrant. She was alive. And now, Gavin was telling me she was essentially gone. I drove 6 hours through a blinding thunderstorm from my home in Oregon to the hospital in Seattle. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my fingers went numb. Clara and I were the only family we had left. Our parents had passed when we were in our 20s, and I had practically raised her. I walked her down the aisle 15 years ago to marry Gavin, a charming real estate developer who seemed to worship the ground she walked on. He gave her the luxury life, the big estate, the security. When I finally sprinted into the ICU at 3 a.m., Gavin was there. He looked wrecked. His eyes were red-rimmed, his tie loosened. He hugged me, weeping into my shoulder, telling me the neurologist found 0 brain activity. He said Clara had always been clear, she didn't want to be a vegetable. She wanted dignity. He was already talking about cremation, about a quiet service. I was too blindsided by grief to question the speed of it all. I just sat by her bed, holding a hand that felt impossibly warm, and cried until my throat burned. The next 48 hours were a haze of medical jargon and sympathetic nods from staff. But as the shock began to wear off, a nagging sensation started to claw at the back of my mind. It was the little things. The way the attending physician, a Dr. Vance, never quite looked me in the eye. The way Gavin kept checking his watch, pacing the whole way and pushing subtly, but persistently, for me to sign the do not resuscitate order and the withdrawal of care forms. And then there was Elena. Gavin introduced her as a spiritual support counselor provided by the hospital. She was young, stunningly beautiful, with raven hair and sharp features. But she didn't act like a counselor. She hovered. She stood too close to Gavin. Once, when I came back from the restroom unexpectedly, I saw her hand resting on his lower back, her fingers tracing the fabric of his suit. When they saw me, she pulled away instantly. Gavin had explained it away smoothly. Elena has just been a rock for me, Eleanor. I don't know how I'd get through this without her guidance. Guidance. Right. That Tuesday afternoon, Gavin called me at my hotel. Eleanor, he said, his voice sounding strangely light, almost relieved. It's time. The doctors say her organs are beginning to fail. We need to be kind to her. I have the paperwork ready. Can you come now? Every alarm bell in my body went off. I had been a nurse for 30 years before I retired. Organ failure didn't just happen instantly without precipitating factors in a stable, ventilated patient. I told myself I was just in denial. I told myself I was looking for a villain because I couldn't fight death. I was wrong. When I walked into room 404, Gavin and Elena were waiting. Elena wasn't wearing a hospital ID badge, something I realized I hadn't seen on her the entire time. They turned to me with expressions of solemn anticipation. On the rolling table sat a stack of legal documents. A heavy black pen sat on top. Eleanor, Gavin said, stepping forward. Thank you. I know this tears you apart. It tears me apart, too. But Dr. Vance says she's gone. These papers, they just make it official. They allow us to unplug the machines and let her drift away. As her sister and legal proxy, I need your signature here, here, and here. He pointed to the lines, his finger tapping the paper rhythmically. Tap, tap, tap. I reached for the pen. I felt the cold plastic against my fingertips. That was when the nurse Sarah, her badge red, lunged. Ma'am, Sarah whispered, her grip like iron on my wrist. Don't sign anything. Please. Just trust me. The room seemed to freeze. The air was sucked out of the space. Gavin's face flushed a deep, ugly crimson. Excuse me? Nurse, what the hell do you think you're doing? This is a private family moment. Get out. Sarah didn't let go. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. I need to check Miss Eleanor's vitals. She looks faint. Protocol. She's fine, Elena snapped, her counselor mask slipping to reveal a sneer. Let her sign the papers so we can end this suffering. 10 minutes, Sarah pleaded, looking directly into my soul. 10 minutes, Eleanor. That's all I ask. I saw the truth in her eyes. It was raw fear. She was terrified of them. Gavin, I said, pulling my hand back and setting the pen down. I do feel faint. I need a moment. Just give me 10 minutes with the nurse to catch my breath. Gavin's jaw clenched so hard I thought his teeth would crack. He exchanged a dark look with Elena. But he couldn't force me without blowing his cover as the grieving husband. Fine, he spat. 10 minutes. But Eleanor, she's suffering. Every second is cruelty. Nurse Sarah practically dragged me into the hallway and pulled me into a supply closet 3 doors down. She locked the door and leaned against it, hyperventilating. I could lose my license, she gasped. I could go to jail for accessing files I shouldn't have. But I can't watch them kill her. The word hung in the air, smelling of bleach and linen. Kill. What are you saying? I demanded, my voice trembling. Your sister isn't brain dead, Sarah said, pulling her phone from her scrub pocket. She is in a medically induced coma caused by a massive overdose of sedatives that aren't on her chart. But the EG. Dr. Vance said. Dr. Vance is lying, she interrupted. I've been on the night shift for 3 days. I noticed that every time the shift changed, your sister's 4 bag was replaced, but not by the floor nurses. By Dr. Vance personally. That never happens. Attending physicians don't change bags. She swiped her screen and shoved the phone toward me. I took a sample from the trash 2 nights ago. I ran a toxicology panel in the lab myself, off the books. Look. I stared at the image of the printout. It showed lethal levels of a heavy sedative, plus a paralytic agent. They are keeping her paralyzed so she can't move, and sedated so she can't wake up, Sarah explained, tears streaming down her face. If you take her off the ventilator now, she won't breathe on her own because of the paralytic. She will suffocate, and it will look like a natural death. But Eleanor, Yesterday, when they were at lunch, I stopped the paralytic drip for an hour. I did a sternum rub. She groaned. She pulled her arm away. Brain-dead patients don't feel pain. She is in there. She is fighting. My knees gave out. I slumped against a shelf of saline bottles. Why? Why would Gavin do this? Money, Sarah whispered. I overheard them. That woman, Elena? She's not a counselor. She's his mistress. I heard them in the stairwell. They were arguing about the payout. Something about a $5 million life insurance policy and a flight to the Cayman Islands booked for tomorrow. The pieces slammed together. The urgency. The lack of eye contact. The mysterious counselor. They were going to murder my sister for a payday and disappear into the sunset. We need proof, I said, a cold rage replacing my grief. We need something the police can use right now. I have a friend in security, Sarah said. We pulled the footage from your sister's room. You need to see this. She tapped her tablet. A grainy black and white video began to play. It was time-stamped 4 days ago, the morning of the collapse. The video showed Gavin's kitchen. I gasped. How do you have this? This isn't hospital footage, Sarah corrected. This is from the nanny cam app on Gavin's phone. He left his iPad unlocked in the room yesterday while he went to get coffee. I recorded the screen. On the video, Clara was standing at the counter, making tea. Gavin walked up behind her. He wasn't hugging her. He held a syringe. He jammed it into her neck. She spun around, eyes wide, and collapsed within seconds. He didn't call 911. He stood over her body, checked his watch, poured himself a cup of coffee, and waited. He waited 20 minutes before picking up the phone to scream for help. I felt like I was going to vomit. It wasn't an aneurysm. He had injected her with something to simulate a stroke. We have to call the police, I whispered. They're already on the way, Sarah said. I called them the second I pulled you out of the room. But we have to keep them there. If Gavin suspects we know, he might try to hurt her physically before the cops arrive. Or he might run. I stood up. I straightened my blouse. I wiped the tears from my face. I'm going back in there. Eleanor, no, Sarah warned. I have to make him think he's won. I have to keep him in that room. I walked back down the hallway. It was the longest walk of my life. I composed my face into a mask of defeat. When I re-entered room 404, Gavin and Elena were whispering frantically by the window. They jumped apart when saw me. Is everything okay? Gavin asked, his eyes darting to the door. Yes, I said, my voice dead and hollow. I needed to pray. I'm ready. Gavin let out a breath he'd been holding. Thank God. You're doing the right thing, Eleanor. Clara would want this. I walked to the bedside table. I picked up the pen. My hand was steady now, cold as ice. Before I sign, I said, looking down at the paper. I have one question. Anything, Gavin said, moving closer, practically salivating over the document. I looked up, locking eyes with him. How long have you been sleeping with her? I pointed the pen at Elena. The silence was absolute. Excuse me? Gavin stammered, his confident facade cracking. And I continued, my voice rising. Did you inject Clara with the poison before or after you poured your morning coffee? Gavin's face went from red to a terrifying, ghostly white. Elena let out a sharp gasp and backed toward the door. You're delusional, Gavin snarled, his eyes narrowing into slits. The grief has made you insane. Give me the pen. He lunged for me. Get away from her. The shout came from the doorway. Dr. Abernathy, the head of neurology, strode in, flanked by 2 armed police officers and hospital security. Gavin Thornton, one of the officers, boomed, stepping forward with handcuffs unclipped. You are under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy, and fraud. Gavin tried to bolt. He shoved Elena into the officer and made a break for the bathroom, presumably to flush something, but the second officer tackled him against the wall. The sound of his expensive suit tearing was the most satisfying thing I had ever heard. Get off me! Gavin screamed, thrashing like a trapped animal. She's lying. That old hag is lying. We have the video, Mr. Thornton, the officer said, snapping the cuffs tight. And we have the toxicology report. Elena didn't even fight. She slumped to the floor, sobbing, instantly turning to him. He made me do it. It was his idea. He said he'd kill me if I didn't help. Shut up. Gavin roared as they dragged him out. As he passed me, his eyes were wild, filled with pure, unadulterated hatred. She was worth nothing alive, Eleanor. Nothing. You're just delaying the inevitable. I watched them drag him down the hallway, screaming obscenities, until the elevator doors closed. Then, silence returned to the room. But the heavy, oppressive feeling was gone. Dr. Abernathy turned to me. We have Dr. Vance in custody in his office. We've already started flushing your sister's system. We've taken her off the paralytics. If Nurse Sarah is right, and I believe she is, she could wake up. I turned to Sarah, who was standing by the door, tears running down her cheeks. I walked over and wrapped my arms around her. We held each other, two strangers bound by a miracle, and we cried. Thank you, I sobbed. You saved her. I just did my job, she whispered. It took 48 hours. 48 hours of sitting by that bed, watching the monitors, praying to a God I hadn't spoken to in years. On Thursday morning, the rain finally stopped. Sunlight broke through the clouds, hitting the window pane. And then I saw it. A finger twitched. Then an eyelid fluttered. I leaned in close. Clara? Can you hear me? Her eyes opened. They were foggy, confused, and terrified. She tried to speak, but the tube prevented it. I squeezed her hand. You're safe, I told her, choking on the words. He's gone. He can never hurt you again. I've got you. The recovery was brutal. The drugs Gavin had used had damaged her kidneys and her motor functions. She had to learn to walk again. She had to learn to trust again. The betrayal of the man she had loved for 15 years left scars that no surgery could heal. But she was alive. 6 months later, I sat in a courtroom and watched Gavin get sentenced. The video evidence was damning. The testimony from Elena, who took a plea deal to testify against him, was the final nail. He received 50 years without parole. Dr. Vance got 20. Clara inherited everything. The irony was sweet. The money Gavin had tried to kill for was now being used to fund his ex-wife's beautiful new life. A year after the nightmare, Clara and I were sitting on a balcony in Italy, the Amalfi Coast, just like she had always dreamed. The Mediterranean was a brilliant, sparkling turquoise. We were sipping lemonade, feeling the warm sun on our faces. Next to us sat Sarah. Clara had used a portion of the settlement to pay for Sarah's advanced nursing degree. She was part of our family now. To trusting your gut, Clara said, raising her glass. Her speech was slightly slurred, a lingering reminder of the attack, but her smile was genuine. To brave nurses, I added, clinking my glass against hers. To second chances, Sarah smiled. I looked out at the ocean, and I thought about that moment with the pen. I thought about how close I had come to signing my sister's death warrant. 10 minutes. Just 10 minutes of hesitation had changed the course of 3 lives. So, I'll ask you again. Have you ever stood at a crossroads where everything looked logical, but your instinct screamed no? Did you listen to it? There are wolves in sheep's clothing everywhere. Sometimes they are strangers. Sometimes they are the people sleeping in the bed next to you. Trust your gut. It's the only thing that never lies to you. And to Gavin, if you're listening to this from your cell, I hope the coffee in prison is terrible. If this story resonated with you, please share it. You never know who is holding a pen right now, about to sign away something precious, who just needs a reminder to wait 10 minutes. Stay safe, stay vigilant, and I'll see you in the next story.